right, everybody, I have had a chance to try out my new airbrush, this one, uh, over the past couple of weeks. Some of you may have seen my kind of first look at it. And this is, of course, the GSI Creos PS-771, aka Mr. Airbrush Custom Grade 018 Double Action. That's a mouthful. Now I have my other airbrush here, the one I have been using for over a decade, and this is the Iwata Custom Micron CMB. And I have it here because it really is serving as the baseline for my thoughts on this one because, well, two reasons. One is I am replacing this airbrush with this airbrush. That was the goal. And the reason it should make a good replacement is that for the most part, this is a direct replacement of this airbrush. But why would I replace it? Why not just get another one? Well, let's start with the basics, and that is, this is, or at least the new one, this is the old version. The new version of this is a $600 airbrush, and this version, or this, let's call it this version. This version of this airbrush is a let's say $50 airbrush, $175 airbrush. I think $175 is probably suggested retail. You can actually find it for under $150 if you look around. Now, so like I said, I've had a chance to use this one on several projects over the last couple of weeks, and I'm just going to go ahead and be right up front. This is every bit as good an airbrush as this. Just, there's no doubt in my mind. This is an airbrush that I've used for more than 10 years. This is an airbrush that I've just started using, functionally identical. They are not identical, however, in some specific ways, and you can see them right off the bat. The Iwata brush, the Iwata CMB, is a little shorter. It has a smaller cup size than the Creos. And so that was initially one of my big concerns. Smaller brush, smaller cup, it's a lighter brush. You know, as it turns out, I weighed them both, and it's like, in terms of ounces, it's a fraction of an ounce difference between the two. In terms of grams, it's something like 20 grams difference. It's just not a big deal. It turns out, I thought it would be. It's not. Another difference, this one has the MAC valve. This one does not have a MAC valve. I actually already had a MAC valve. Oh, in case you didn't know, this is for controlling your air pressure at the airbrush, so that you don't have to reach down and adjust it at the compressor. You might think, well, I can just do that at the compressor. Yeah, it's not always super convenient, especially if you just want to do it really quick. You want to open it up really wide and spray it out for cleaning, or you want to close it up a little bit, to get a certain effect with your airbrush. It's kind of nice, as it turns out, having it closer to hand. So that's a difference. Another difference, and I can't remember if this is now a feature on the new one, but this has the cutaway here, and frankly, it's really funny. I just noticed it. It's not something that I find useful all the time, but it is sometimes useful to be able to pull this back, and it sometimes helps clear blockages up front. They both have the needle limiter. This is a feature that is included on like almost every airbrush now. It is also a feature that I've never heard anybody say they use. When I first got this airbrush, I tried using it a bunch of times, and I never found it useful. So it's there. Maybe you like it. You know what? If you do like that and you do have a use for it, let me know in the comments, because I'd be really curious to find out what you're using that for. I know what it's meant to be used for, and that is, you know, if you're not good at trigger control and you want to be able to stop yourself from pulling it beyond a certain point, that's what it's for. But I don't know. I never needed it. Well, I think maybe I already had the trigger control I needed by the time I got there. All right, let's talk about the cup size. This is another thing that I thought was going to end up being a negative. And you think, well, bigger cup, why is that a negative? Well, one thing, weight, and as it turns out, that's not really a thing. But another thing, it just felt like it was going to get in the way. Like, it might make seeing what I'm doing harder. Not really the case. The one thing it does that is kind of a problem, I like this because it lets me mix a smaller amount of paint in the cup, or it allows me to mix a smaller amount of paint, and so that I'm never wasting paint. For some reason, with a larger cup, I find myself mixing up more paint than I need. Even though I know, like, this many drops of this many drops of that, it just seems to get lost down there, and I'm like, well, that's not enough. And then I mix up a little more. Don't need to. It's not a big deal. And there is a flip side to that. And the flip side is that it makes cleaning easier, because you can really fill this up with water, or as I use, soapy water. You can really fill that up, and you don't have to keep going back again and again and again to clean it up. And so you can flood this, really dilute the excess paint that you have in there, dump it, and you maybe do that twice, whereas here you might have to do it 4 times to really get the same amount of cleaning action. I have not figured out what these little cutouts in the body are for. I don't know if they're just aesthetic. I don't hold the airbrush up there, so that doesn't do anything. I don't know. I don't know what that is. But so the bottom line, though, is that this sprays identically to this when it's at its best. Now, let's be fair. This actually right now is a much better airbrush than this specific CMB, because this specific CMB has been my primary go-to airbrush for 10 years, and I beat the hell out of it over that 10 years. And so it's not working at 100%. It's one of the reasons I'm replacing it. The other reason is, again, this is the old version, and parts are starting to become harder to find. Speaking of parts, though, so that's another consideration. Beyond the price of the airbrushes themselves, and again, this is less than a third of the price of this, parts-wise, this is cheaper as well, as would make sense. It's a cheaper airbrush in general. But so the two things that I replace most on airbrushes in general are the tip and the needle, because the tips wear over time, and you can also screw them up. And the tip and the needle, if you do like I do and spray without a protective cap, they get bent. The tip for this I can find at spraygardener.com, which is one of really the few places I can find extra parts for this thing in the US, is $35. For this, $54, but the listed retail is $73. Now, I've never paid that much for it, but yeah. So anyway, so that is a big difference. Needle-wise, it's about the same. You can find needles for this airbrush for about $22. These are $20. Listed retail for the needle, of course, is about $31. So I don't know. I never see anybody selling them for that actual price. And just another comparison, it's not something you would need to change all the time, but just as a point of comparison, this part right here, which is the the head or the head base. This one is $30. This one is $100. So there's that. And that's, again, that's at the discounted price. On the, what was the next part? Oh, needle chuck. Now the needle chuck is this part here. Yeah, I don't want to take the whole thing apart, but it's this part here, the part that's coming in and out there. And they're different. It's one of the few parts that are very different between the two airbrushes. This has a needle chuck. There's I don't know how to best display this. Oh, maybe. Okay, let's do this. If you look right here behind the button, you've got this little wavy piece right here. Now on the CMB, it is a separate piece from the needle chuck. I actually had to replace that on here because it got worn out. Because again, 10 years of nearly daily use. So the trigger pushes up against that. It pushes into the chuck. And that's your whole, double action thing going on there. So that gets worn. And that was the last major piece I needed to replace on the CMB before I replaced it. This is connected to the chuck on this airbrush. They are separate pieces on the CMB, or at least on this one. In the new version of the CMB, they're one piece, or maybe two connected pieces is the best way to say that. So the new version of the CMB is like the Creos PS-771 or Mr. Airbrush Custom Grade 018 Double Action. Anywho. In any case, the needle chuck for the CMB is about $12, and surprisingly $15. And I think that is because on here you're getting two pieces, on here you're getting one. So maybe I should have actually gotten the price for the other part, but I don't think I can find that part anymore. So that also brings up something else, and that is that if I'd wanted to, I might have been able to Frankenstein a new version of my CMB using parts from the Creos, because most of the parts are interchangeable. Not all of the parts. Like I said, that needle chuck, which is a pretty major part, not interchangeable. You know what, though? Let's do a test. Let's take a look at... I'm not going to do a side-by-side comparison because it wouldn't be fair. This one is not up to snuff at the moment. But I do want to show you how this sprays. So let's do that, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more. All right, I hope you can see that, but here's a pencil line for comparison. Not a particularly sharp pencil, but it is an incredibly precision instrument. And I am just super excited to have the opportunity to share it with you. It is, again, in a way, it's sort of the holy grail of tools, where you find something that's as good as the expensive thing, but you find it for much, much cheaper. It's what I'm always doing when I'm out shopping for new things for work. I mean, it's what you want. It's what you want to discover. You want to discover that thing that is as good as the expensive thing. And that's, I don't know what else to say about it except that, except that. All right, so let me wrap this up a little bit with a bit of cautionary notes. Well, one of them started out that way. Creos, GSI Creos, Mr. Hobby. Well, actually, when I first heard of this airbrush, I heard it called the GSI Creos, and I didn't know who that was. And it always concerns me when, my question is going to be, is this a company that's going to be gone tomorrow? Am I going to be able to find parts for it? I don't want to be stuck in a situation where I need something critical for it and can't find it anymore. And then I realized that in digging a little bit, that GSI Creos is actually a company that I used to be known as Gunze Sangyo. And Mr. Hobby is a hobby product line that has been around for years and years and years. So that's not really a concern. The one thing that is kind of a concern is when you go around looking for replacement parts for this, they seem to be in limited supply in the US. The only place I could find that had a really good range of replacement parts, pretty much you can rebuild this whole thing from what they have, is through spraygunner.com, which is great. You know, that's fine. That's not a problem. I would just feel better if there were more options. I actually bought this on Amazon. So you can get the airbrushes all over the place, but getting the parts, not so much, at least not at the moment. Perhaps as more people start using these, parts will become more available. Obviously, you're not going to stock parts if nobody's buying them because hardly anybody has the airbrush. So that's a thing. But in terms of its actual usefulness as a tool, it's fantastic. I have no complaints. I think you would do yourself well, especially if, like me, your primary thing is painting miniatures. It's great for that. I didn't think to do a larger spray with this, but you know, you're going to get most of your hobby work out of a brush, even though this is really a detail brush. Most larger, let's say, for example, you're a 40K player. I know I'm losing some of my viewers because they're like, what? 40K? Yeah, 40K. Game. Miniatures. Tanks. And you're going to paint tanks with this? It's going to work out just fine. Not a problem. The only thing that this is not going to be good for is if you're going to be doing larger things like big terrain pieces, anything like that. You'd want something a little heftier in terms of the spray tip. But I would say for most folks doing, hobby models, this is going to take care of 90%, 95% of the things that you're working on. So this can be your all-around brush. And I don't know what else to say. I love this airbrush. I'm super happy to have gotten it, and I hope you get one too. And I think that's going to wrap it up for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.